Hey, sixth graders, it's Mrs. Zimmerman. We are here for another lesson and we are still doing algebra. So today's lesson is on the properties of addition and multiplication. I'm going to share my screen so that way we can just get started right away. Now, these are properties that you should be familiar with. Okay, you've heard of the different things that we're going to talk about today, but instead of just using regular numbers, we are going to go in and use, algebra, the stuff that we've been learning, add some variables, exponents, parentheses, things like that. Okay? All right, here we go. Take out a paper, pencil, and let's get started. First property that we are going to learn about is the commutative property. Okay, and this is the commutative property of addition and multiplication. So what that means, this can only apply to addition and multiplication problems. You can't do this if you're subtracting or dividing. It doesn't work like that. So if we look at the first example here, it says if we're using a number, 5 plus 8 is the same thing as 8 plus 5. And for multiplication, 5 times 8 is the same thing as 8 times 5. Let's try it. What's 5 times 8? 40. What's 8 times 5? 40. They are equal to each other. So commutative says that even if we switch the order, we're still going to get the same answer. Now, let's look over here at the algebra section. So if we add variables, is this still true? Well, A plus B, is that the same thing as B plus A? Yeah, it would be, right? Because I just said you can switch numbers when you're adding and multiplying and still get the same answer. Let's look at the next type of property. And the next type of property is associative property. Associative, the root word here is associate, okay? We're going to associate numbers using parentheses. So if I have 7 plus 4 plus 2, and let's say I put the parentheses around the 7 plus 4 plus 2, or if I move the parentheses over 2, well, I guess it would just be one number, but now we have 4 and 2 inside of the parentheses. Will we get the same answer? This property says that we will. What's 7 plus 4? 11 plus 2 is 13. Now let's go over here. We do parentheses first. So 4 plus 2 is 6, plus 7 is 13. Yes, this is true. Okay, same when you multiply. If we start with the parentheses here, or if we move them over, it's going to be the same thing. So the new part here is, again, the algebra, adding the variables and being able to do the exact same thing. So, some examples. Simplify the expression. So let's look at what we have. X plus 4 plus 4. Now, the commutative property says that I can change these around, and the associative property says that I can group them any way that I want to. I don't see any groupings. I don't see any parentheses, so the commutative property says that I can move them around. But I don't really see anything that I need to move, because what's 4 plus 4? 8. What's 8 plus x? We don't know what x is. We just need to simplify. Can I make that any smaller? No. So that would be the answer. We're basically trying to get these as small as we can. Now, what about this one? We have 4 times 3p. I see some parentheses here, so I bet we're going to use the associative property. So let's move those parentheses. I'm trying to simplify it, which means I need to get the numbers as small as I can. These two right next to each other say to multiply. So associative property says that when I'm multiplying, I can move the parentheses over. So what if I just move them over? Is this the same thing? What's 4 times 3? 12. And then times p. And we cannot get it any smaller than that, so that's the answer. Let's look at another one. Maybe if it goes away. There it is. Okay. All right. So we have 2.4 plus 4n plus 9. Okay, well, let's think here. The numbers that I could combine are the 2.4 and the 9. I could combine those two. I cannot combine the 4n because the other two numbers don't have an n, so I can't put them together. So let's think about this. The commutative property says that I can move these around and I'm going to get the same answer. So what if I just switch these two numbers around? Because I'm adding right here in between. So I could switch them around and then I'd be able to add. So if I have 2.4 plus 9 plus 4n, put that on the outside, now could I simplify this? Yeah, I could, right? Because now I can add the 2.4 and the 9 together to get 11 and 4/10 plus 4n. They go together. And the 4n has nothing to go with, so we keep it the same. Another one, 6 times b times 7. Now, again, I think this could be a commutative property because we could change the b and the 7 around. Because, hold on, let me backtrack for 1 second. What can I combine here? The 6 has no variable and the 7 has no variable, so we can put those two together. And the b cannot because it has a variable. So what has to be switched is the 7 and the b, so the 6 and 7 can go together. And then we'll just put the b on the outside. 6 times 7 is 42, 42 times b. And that is as small as I can get that. Okay, another one. Let's see what we got here. 0 times b times 9. All right, what can I combine? Well, I've got two numbers with no variable and one number with a variable. So let's combine the ones that go together. In order to do that, I'm going to have to switch the b and the 9 around so they're right next to each other. So I have 0 times b times 9. Oh no, I didn't even switch it. Sorry. 0 times 9 times b. 0 times 9 is 0 times b. Can I make that any smaller? Actually, I can, because 0 times any number is always 0. So even if I don't know what b is, it doesn't matter. If b equals 8, that would be 8 times 0, still 0. If b equaled 1,000, that would be 1,000 times 0, still 0. So no matter what, it's going to be 0. You are taking those properties, the commutative and associative properties, and using them to rearrange numbers so that way we can get them into a smaller expression. Okay, ooh, let's do another one. Okay, here I see some parentheses, so we're probably going to be using the associative property. Because what can I combine here? Well, the 7 and the 12 have no variables, so we don't have to, or we can put those together, and the x doesn't. So what I would do is just move the parentheses over so that way the 7 plus 12 is in there. And then what's 7 plus 12? 19, and then we just tack on the plus x. Can I get that any smaller? No, I cannot. So then I'm done. Okay, next one. Now this one here, I see these two numbers don't have a variable, so let's combine them. We'll switch these two around because commutative property says we can do that. So in the parentheses, I have 6 and 1/10 plus 8 and 4/10 plus x. Add my decimals together, and I'm going to have 14 and 5/10 plus x, and that cannot be any smaller. Okay, I think, well, I'll just pause here on this one. This one you can pause, or this third one if you want to pause and do some examples by yourself, but I'm going to move on. Okay, now the next property that we're going to do is the property of 0. And the property of zero, addition property of zero is that if you take any number plus zero, it's going to be the same number, right? 7 plus 0 is 7. 800 plus 0 is 800. And the same thing works with algebra. If you have an a plus 0, it's still going to be just a. So let's see here. The next one is the multiplication properties. There are two. There's one for 0 and there's one for 1. So let's think about 0. Any number, I already said it, but just review. Any number multiplied by 0 is 0, which is the same if it's an algebra. And then any number times 1 is that same number. So this is similar to the addition property of 0, what we just did. But in multiplication, it's times 1 instead. We're going to pause right here. Okay, so let's use those properties, addition and multiplication, and simplify these expressions. The directions say to explain each step, but we actually don't have to worry about that part. So we're just going to go ahead and solve it. Simplify it, I'm sorry. So 9 times 0 times p. The 9 and the 0 don't have variables, so those we can combine, and they're already right next to each other. So what's 9 times 0? 0. And what's 0 times p? Well, we kind of already covered this, right? But officially, it's going to be 0. That one's easy. Let's look at another one. Ooh, okay. Well, I see here that we have 12 times b times 0. Another times 0. The 12 and the 0 can be combined. So let's switch them. And now I have 12 times 0 times b. Now I can simplify because 12 times 0 is 0 times b, which is always just going to be 0. So anytime something is multiplied by 0, it's all going to be 0. If you're only multiplying, I should say. Okay, now let's look at this one. We have e plus 5 and 15 in parentheses plus 0. What can I combine? The 15 and the 0. So the associative property says that I can move these parentheses over. Let's do it. E plus 15 plus 0. What's 15 plus 0? Well, we already know that's just going to be 15, right? Plus e, which I cannot make smaller, so that's my final answer. Let's do one more. 1 times m times 24. 1 and 24 can go together, so let's switch these two around. Hopefully you're kind of getting the hang of this. Times m. 24 times 1 is just 24 times m, and I cannot make any smaller. So that's it. Oops. Okay, now let's just do one quick review here with all the properties together so we can see them all in one place. And then once we finish off this page, this would be a good place to pause to do your assignment. First off, the commutative property of addition says if we have h plus 11, that is the same thing as 11 plus h. The commutative property of multiplication, so same thing, we're just multiplying, says that 12 times k is the same thing as k times 12. The associative property of addition, associate, the parentheses, says that we can move parentheses. So in this next example, we can move the parentheses over, and we're still going to get the same answer. And the same thing is true with multiplication. We can do 12 times 5, and then times 4 and get the same thing. Okay, next we have the multiplication property of 1. Anything times 1 is itself. So 18 times 1 is just 18 times w. And the addition property of 0 says if we add by 0, we're going to get the same thing. So it's just going to be 26 plus c. All right, so as you can see, let me get this ready. There it is. Okay, This is all of the different properties combined, okay? So if I were you, I would probably pause this video right here. That way you have this this slide up, so that way when you're doing your homework, you can just look and say, oh yeah, what property was that? What property was that? But you don't have to. That's just a suggestion. Otherwise, good luck and rewatch it if you need to.